The day after looks like there's more questions than there are answers. The trade deadline is coming up. Who ran cold and who ran hot against the Broncos today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, Chiefs Kingdom. There's a lot to be excited about as the trade deadline is nearing. We're going to talk about that coming up later in the show as we take a look at what happened against the Broncos as the Chiefs get ready for their next visit to an old friend, shall we say. Welcome to Locked On Chiefs, part of Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day for every platform, everywhere for free, whether it's here on YouTube where you can like and sub and hit that bell. You subscribers will get extra information as you get those notifications when we are live on the platform like we are today. Then get on the audio on Spotify, on Apple, and everywhere you can get a podcast. You can get us for free 5 days a week. Plus, you everydayers already know that, and we appreciate you very much, Locos. If you guys want to be an everydayer, just get subbed on multiple platforms, and you'll definitely get the show every single day like the Locos do. We have a lot to go over. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, NFL33.com, and RGR Football. And if you're new to us, if you happen to see us on a billboard, welcome. We've been covering this team for going on 7 years as a pair here with my partner, Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner, where you can get breakdowns on the cap, on third down efficiencies, all the information that you want to get, you can find there. We're really happy to be bringing this show to you again, and we're happy to welcome all the new guests. We have a lot for you. We are going to go over what did work well against the Broncos that the Chiefs need to capitalize on next week against those Dolphins. What does this trade deadline look like? And we're going to start today on hot and cold against the Broncos. It was very cold out there, but a couple of hot spots stood out. A lot of hubbub today about how it went down, and I want to point out the guy that stood out the most to me upon reviewing production and the snap metrics, and that is George Karlaftis, who just continues to keep pressing and keep building. And he stood out on the defensive side on a day when Chris Jones was the focus of the Broncos offensive front. Karlaftis is picking up that slack, and I'm really happy with the way that he's been performing.
Yeah, 2.5 sacks. I thought it was ridiculous the day he had. He is continuing to get into a better position as a pass rusher, and I think that's very encouraging moving forward. Minihue had a good day as well. Wasn't as good as last week, but he still was producing pressure. Chris Jones got a couple of pressures, but it wasn't a ton. They did focus on him a ton. I'm guessing he got double teamed most of the snaps he was in.
Yeah, that's true. When you take a wider look at George Karlaftis here, if you happen to not be on the YouTube feed, let me break it down for you. Against the Denver Broncos in meeting number 2 of this season, George Karlaftis had a 13.6% win rate in his pass rush. That means better than 1 out of 10 pass rushes actually got where he beat the block. That turned into 6 pressures. And as the funnel works down, that funnel turned into 2.5 sacks. That is a normal process of whittling down how you get to the quarterback. And he was the leader on the day in all of those categories. The interesting thing that you have to take a look at is when you take a step back and you just look at pass rush rates, who are the most successful? Who graded out the best? That's the really interesting part, because Karlaftis was up amongst the best, but it was the linebackers that really stood out when you take a look at PFF grades. And again, this is your common notice for what PFF grades mean, grain of salt included for sure. But as I share that up here, I do want to get you guys a look at it. Chris, for you, does it stand out that Leo Chenal obviously had the big play? Willie Gay, Drew Tranquill were contributing on pass rush as well.
Yeah, and I thought Drew Tranquill played well when he was able to. He missed a couple of plays, or maybe just one play because of the injury. Willie Gay obviously went out during the game. Hopefully, he can get him back for the Dolphins game. But Chenal's attack and the sack, that just shows exactly what he's great at. He got downhill quick, got after the quarterback, and didn't let him get away. And that's exactly what you need from him when he's rushing the passer. And we've talked about that over the past couple of years with him, is maybe that's a position where he can actually line up, maybe not necessarily at the linebacker level, but near to the line of scrimmage, and use his ability to get quickly upfield.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And when you take a look at who produced the pressure, the guy that was running hot right next to George Karlaftis was Mike Dana, who moved around the front, was able to produce pressure, did get home again, produced a couple hurries as well. You can see the win percentage isn't quite as good there for Mike Dana, but he's still contributing. I think that's what it comes down to, is you need a group that can step up day by day, matchup by matchup, and help get to the hole.
Go back for just a second. Check out the rookie. Win percentage of 20%. Granted, it's not very great. Right? Not a lot of snaps, but he's continuing to show progression in production. And the big thing and the big difference with Karlaftis from last year compared to FAU for this year is Karlaftis was in a position where they didn't really have anybody to start above him. Mm-hmm. FAU, they have guys. Karlaftis was obviously going to be a starter. Aminihue was signed to be a starter. Dana has played fantastic and should continue to be a guy that gets a lot of snaps. So to me, I think that you're going to continue to see FAU continue to get sprinkled in at times. But winning 20% of the time, winning 1 out of your 5 snaps is pretty good. Getting hit on the quarterback, that's productive.
Yeah. Contacts with the quarterback are always an important stat. And you can also see, too, that Turk Wharton got a pressure as well on just 7 pass rush snaps. So that's pretty good efficiency when you're not getting that many runs at the quarterback. There was a heavy volume of run game from the Broncos yesterday. That always limits how many pass rush opportunities you have. I felt like all those guys were putting out some good effort and making sure that they were contributing to the whole front's attack on Russ Wilson. They're going to have to do that again against Tua. We're going to talk about what they can build on coming up later in the show. And good point, Cole. We appreciate your comments, and shout out to the Kansas Jayhawks for knocking off number 6 Oklahoma. Just wanted to mention that when it happens. So that said, when we get back later in the show, we're going to talk about what worked against the Broncos that they need to double down on. But there are trade rumors. It's coming down, and it's going to happen tomorrow. We're going to talk about the trade deadline coming up here right after this.
And I want to tell you, our friends, about DoorDash. DoorDash is fantastic if you're looking for, game day food for tonight. If you're listening to this on Monday before the Monday Night Football game, maybe you want to go get some Oklahoma Joe's. Maybe you want to have it delivered, be able to have that for dinner as you're watching the football game. If you're hosting a party on Sunday to watch the Chiefs play, probably maybe not this coming week considering they're playing at 8:30, but maybe you are. Maybe you're going to order some Hy-Vee on Saturday so you can get it delivered and get your party set up before the Chiefs play in Germany at 8:30 on Saturday. Just go check out DoorDash. They have lots of different places you can go. Like I said, Hy-Vee, Walgreens, CVS, Joe's Kansas City. Lots of different places you can get stuff delivered directly to your door. You get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. When you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23, subject to change, terms apply. Again, that is go download the DoorDash app, and you can get up to 50% off a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. When you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCK23, subject to change, terms apply.
Now, this is that special kind of movement you get just before the time of year where you can see players starting to get moved. This is trade deadline watch as of officially today. And I know you guys are on top of it because a lot of Chiefs Kingdom is. There have been a couple of moves announced throughout the league here. Williams being one of them, coming over from the Giants. There's going to be a move there. What should happen and what might happen is we're going to take a look at the pass catchers coming up in the next segment. So make sure that you're with us. We appreciate you listening to the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for free everywhere. What we need to talk about is what could the Chiefs do? What should they do? A lot of focus on what can they do to just add a little push to this offense. There's a Derrick Henry rumor out there. There's a D-Hop rumor out there. We're going to start with the rumors. We're going to talk about what the actual reports are. And in kind of a strange one, it does seem that there is a possibility, according to Jeremy Fowler, that the Chiefs are looking to move Richie James, a guy that is technically not available to be on the roster at the moment, but could be coming back soon. And when you take a look at the talent that has boiled down on this roster to the point where we're talking about not having a true number one, because you have so many talents that are number 2s and number 3s and number 4s that are all competing for playing time, it makes sense to thin that herd a little bit. I don't know that there's a whole lot of value, but it does make sense to me that you might put some feelers out to let Richie get back on a roster where he can contribute.
Well, the other side of it is not only do you have a bunch of 2s and 3s and 4s, but you also have a lot of slot receivers. You have guys that should be playing in the slot. Sky Moore is a slot guy. Rashee Rice is a slot guy. Richie James would be a slot guy. Those are all guys that should be getting those snaps in there. Kadarius Toney is probably another one that you would, pencil in there as a slot guy. you only have so many snaps you can give to those types of wide receivers. The Chiefs have a few too many. When you talk about Richie James, I'm kind of surprised that they're wanting to trade him. I don't know that they're going to be able to get it done. I think that that's probably going to be something where they're going to end up having to cut him. But it is kind of interesting that they're talking about trying to trade him when they have 2 roster spots open. They could bring him back. I mean, they have the roster spots available for him, but it doesn't sound like they're going to go that direction. So I would imagine if he isn't re-signed or if he isn't traded, they would release him. But the interesting part about that is I don't think they're really going to gain any cap space.
Well, and I think it's more of a utility of how do you use the player. With McCole Hardman's return, despite that muffed punt, you have to think that he's still the front runner to get those snaps. And if Richie's not going to be returning punts, and you know that you have to get snaps to Richie and to Sky Moore because you got to continue to develop those guys. Everybody's down on Sky Moore today, and I understand it was a drop. It was unfortunate. Could have turned that game around. But the only way to fix that is to continue to go to him, to pepper him with more passes and involve him more. That means taking snaps away from other receivers. And so for me, I think it's just about why have a guy on the roster when you might be able to get an asset if you're not going to use him. That's what it comes down to me.
No, and I don't disagree with you. I'm sitting here looking at the Chiefs cap calculator, and basically what it is he's a veteran. His salary was guaranteed for the season, so I don't really think that they're going to get anything. I agree with you. If they're not going to use him because he's not going to be the returner, then they need to make a move and release him. So that would not shock me if they go that direction.
I think it would be interesting to see if they can move him for another player. Can you get something in return where you're swapping salary, or at least you're biting into what could be kind of a steep bill if you're trying to get somebody who, let's face it, the number one need on this roster right now is a number one outside receiver. There's plenty of guys, like you said, that can start and play in the slot. Honestly, there's a couple more guys that I think need to be more day in, day out, every down wide receivers. Nothing against MVS and Justin Watson. They've been fairly productive, especially in terms of relative to their past seasons in this offense. But you need somebody that can draw coverage that isn't Travis Kelce, because condensing in the middle on Travis is becoming easier as teams learn how to bracket and use their safeties to just take away some of those lanes. Make Patrick hold the ball a little bit. A lot of stats out there today about Patrick holding the ball more than 3.5 seconds, and that's absolutely true. There is pressure that eventually gets to him, but when you hold the ball that long, it's generally because you don't have a place to go with it, and that's the number one problem.
No, and I agree with that, but you also need to realize that if that is going to be the case, he's holding the ball that long, that's not on the offensive line. You can't expect an offensive lineman to hold somebody out there for 5 seconds. That's not the way that's supposed to work. It's supposed to be a 2 or 3 step, or 3, 5 step, 7 step, whatever it is. The ball is supposed to get out, and Mahomes has done fantastic about living outside the playbook, living outside, and being able to make plays downfield. Unfortunately, this year, it seems like more often than not, he can't find somebody, and he needs to be able to just throw the ball away at times. And there were a couple of times where, the fumble specifically, if he throws the ball away, they live to play another down, and they probably score points on that drive. You look at the interception late, obviously, I think there was pass interference. You talked about Sky Moore earlier. It was pointed out by Coach Reed, somebody had a hold of his arm, so he couldn't get 2 arms to get the ball. You still want him to try to make the catch, but obviously if you only have one hand, it's going to be hard to do. This wide receiver group is going to continue to struggle until they get to a point where they have guys that are playing down in, down out. And, I think that probably means 40 snaps for the guys that you think are going to be your future. Obviously, Rashee Rice is going to be that guy. As much as people don't like it, Sky Moore is probably going to be one of those guys. What they need to figure out is if they can get Rashee Rice to be effective on the outside. If they can get Rice to be effective on the outside, then you have the ability to put Sky Moore inside and have him run some of those routes. The other question is, what are they doing with Kadarius Toney? He was in for 11 snaps, but didn't get any targets at all. You can't have a guy like that and not get him any targets at all. And obviously, I know there's probably some scenarios where he wasn't getting open, but you got to have some kind of plays for him. He's a special talent that you don't have in any other way. And then you got McCole Hardman, who again is another slot guy. You just have too many of those types of wide receivers, and it's really hurting this offense right now.
So let's take it from the other side. If you're running the show, if you're advising Brett Veach this evening, who are you trying to acquire? Whether it's maybe moving Tony, or maybe moving Richie James, however it can help. The only way I can see an effective trade for anybody that can actually help in this particular department is by moving a player's salary as well. So that would mean giving up an asset, maybe in the wide receiver room, to go try to attain another one. Does that even make sense at this point?
I don't think you're going to have to move a wide receiver. I think you look at your roster and you figure out who you can restructure and push a little bit of money down the road. There's a guy out there right now, DeAndre Hopkins, they could afford easily when it comes to the amount of money he's owed. He just has no guaranteed money in 2024. The amount that he would actually need to get paid is very little for the rest of the season. So they could afford him. They would probably need to make a move to be able to have his salary and still keep a couple of dollars on the table. Mm-hmm. But let me see. I have this. I actually wrote about this last week. DeAndre Hopkins is going to cost, let's see, $891,000 against the cap for 2023, and then $480,000 in 2024 for not likely to be earned incentives. So that's a guy that it could be a legitimate number one wide receiver in this offense, could be an outside wide receiver, and would cost you less than $1 million this year and less than $500,000 next year. And again, none of it is guaranteed in 2024. The not likely to be earned incentive, basically it's a per game incentive for him to play. He didn't play all the games last year, so if he plays all the games this year, he would still be owed almost $500,000 in 2024, but they're not going to care about that. It's all about $900,000 this year. So they could afford that if they were able to, just restructure Travis Kelce and throw, $2 million of his salary as signing bonus or, as a roster bonus. You don't have to free up that much. You just have to probably free up about $500,000 and you can probably afford it. But you're still going to want to leave yourself about $3 million to get by for the rest of the season.
Yeah, you got to have a little operating capital. But it's an interesting scenario because if you put D-Hop in this offense, much like we talked about in the offseason, he garners that attention and gives you a two-pronged attack again that defenses have to account for, especially after this last week where he actually kind of sparked up and showed out to try to get traded. I think it's still worth a scenario that maybe you can do something like that. We'll have to see. We'll have more news for you as the trade deadline comes down and anything that comes out overnight. Make sure the ways that you can find out the latest are to check out the shorts feed here on the YouTube channel and to get on the text line. That's 816-357-8781. Get signed up over there. And that's how you'll get the fastest breaking news possible. Now, what can they build on? Whether it's an addition to the player here within the next 48 hours, or whether it's just doubling down on what did work against Denver. As few things as there were, we're going to take a look at them. But I want you to know a couple of other things because the action we saw versus the Broncos is not the only action. And if you want to get in on the scores, the best way to do is with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers are getting a great deal with $150 right now in bonus bets after you win a $5 moneyline bet. You just got to place one bet on the money line for $5 and you get $150 in bonus bets applied to your account. Super simple, easy to accomplish the one win that you need to get that done. If you're thinking about joining FanDuel, now is the time to get into the action because it's here right now for spreads, props, money lines, over-unders, the whole 9 yards. You can get it all in one place at FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off this season and get into high gear as the Chiefs go over to Germany. It is with FanDuel only at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL in this area, and I think you guys want to check that out. What I want to check out is what can be done to pick up where they left off. There's been a couple of good games here for this Kansas City group, and now obviously Denver was not one of them. So how do you reset, turn the page? We're going to talk with Matt Derrick tomorrow about what's going on inside the locker room as they try to get past this and start looking at moving forward. The team is traveling Thursday evening to go over to Germany so they can have a practice over there nice and early, a couple days out. Now, the Dolphins have already headed over. So they're out of the cold. And I know it's still not super cold in Kansas City, but it's still a little chilly. It's still a little chilly here as I look out the window. But there's a couple of things that were decently working. And we talked about time to throw a little bit earlier in the previous segment. But I do want to highlight one thing that is a misconception after that ball game, and is that somehow that the offensive line wasn't doing its job. Because when you take a look at pressure allowed, there were just 3 pressures on the day that got in, I think, a serious way. The only hits that Patrick Mahomes took were the 3 sacks. There were a couple of other pressures that moved him off of his spot. But again, when you're holding the ball that long, that is the expectation. As a whole, the offensive line, I think, did a decent job of allowing a total of 13 pressures on 38 pass attempts, and honestly about 42 dropbacks with the intention to throw a pass. So is it perfect? Is it optimal? Probably not, but it's not as bad as it felt and it appeared immediately post-game after watching him have to run around.
Look at Donovan Smith leading the way. That's a little shocking.
I thought you might have that reaction, especially when you run into your own quarterback there on what is the most obvious and big play of that ball game. But this all goes back to the concept of what's wrong with this offense. And that is you have all this talent that is unproven. You have the quarterback that is ultra proven and unfortunately tends to, I think, zero in on the tight end too much. And that takes away from what this offensive line is doing. And that is giving him 3 seconds to throw the ball if and when he can just pull the trigger and make sure that he gets through his reads. Because as we've shown you, and certainly if you've watched any of our film breakdowns over on RGR Football, there are open receivers in this group. There are guys. In fact, when they are targeted, the average here is that you have 4 in the top 60 that have a gap on their coverage defender. That's important to know. So it's not just the wide receiver room. It's about the time. It's about the ability to just let the ball rip. And I think that's something that we have to talk about with Patrick.
Yeah, and I think that you also have to look at, the play calling. And I'm not saying necessarily the play calling because I think that the play calling is horrible. I think the play calling can be good, but you have to wonder how many of those plays is Travis Kelce one of the first 2 reads? I'm not saying I want Kelce to,
all of them?
Yeah. I'm not saying I want Kelce to be targeted a ton less, but if you're going to make him the first or second read, Pat's going to probably use the first 2 seconds to watch and see if Kelce's going to get open. And then you're missing other wide receivers that could be open. On the interception to Kelce that he forced into the play, if he would have gone, I think one more progression, Sky Moore's running open around, along the middle of the field. Obviously, I haven't watched it all 22, but from the game angle, it looked like Sky Moore was running wide open when he forced the ball to Kelce. And, you're going to continue to have situations where if you're going to continue forcing the ball to Kelce, all they have to do is double and triple team him. And then you're in a world of hurt if Mahomes is not going to continue looking at other guys as much. And I know he keeps coming out and saying he trusts the other guys on the team. And you don't see that at times when he's playing.
Well, and let's be real honest. There is no other answer that he can give that does him any good. If you're going to help this offense, you have to come out and say you trust those receivers because they need to hear you say it. And here's the thing that stands out to me. Unlike years past, Patrick is not his best when he is under pressure. That is generally a trend that he's just as good when he is under pressure as when he is not. The difference is he's taking advantage of the blitz before pressure gets to him. Well, that means quick game. That means when they're sending someone, he identifies it and gets the ball out. I think what this offense is missing right now, that they have to double down on some of the good plays they had against the Broncos, is the timing and the quick game. There should be no holding the ball for deep threats. You're going to be tempted to try to one-up Tyreek Hill because he's going to catch a deep ball on you, I guarantee you, with the youth of this secondary. You can't play that game. You have to play your game. You have to get the ball out on a 3 to 5 step drop, no 7s, and get that thing slung. There is opportunities there, especially against the Dolphins secondary. And I think that's the big key takeaway as we get ready to look for the Dolphins game.
Well, and I think that I agree with you, but I think you also have to look at it. And I think you have to hit the top of your drop and you need to be getting rid of the ball, like you said, but you need to be making sure that you're not just going for one guy. If you can start spreading the ball around a little bit more to where you start getting 5 or 6 targets to different wide receivers, to different tight ends, at least looking their direction and maybe throwing the ball there, you got to give them an opportunity. I mean, there is stats. AWS came out with a stat, or Next Gen Stats came out with a stat. Average separation of the Chiefs receivers is over 3 yards, or 3 yards right now. Now, obviously, that's not right all the time, but if they're on average getting that kind of separation, that means people are generally going to be open. It's not all the time, but people are generally going to be open. You just have to be looking at the right place at the right time. And I get it's all kind of a gamble. Mahomes has done fantastic things for this offense, and we kind of give him a little bit more of a pass. But at this point, the only way you're going to get better is if you spread the ball around and you show that you are trusting your guys. If it leads to more picks, then that becomes an issue. But you can't force the ball to Kelsey. And as far as the second pick goes, I'm not really going to count that against Mahomes. One, it was pass interference. Two, you're trying to make a play on 4th and 22. So kind of really hard to hold that one against him.
And Dennis Mahoney, thank you for reminding me. I forgot Jalen Ramsey did come back for the Dolphins. So that makes things even harder. So again, that brings it back to how can you get Jalen off the break? 3 steps and make your stem and get out of that cut. That's the way that you beat Jalen Ramsey. And thank you for reminding me of that. Last number that I want to throw at you guys, because I think it's really important. Last week, 17.8. That's how many play action passes percentage-wise the Chiefs ran. There is not enough threat. We talked last night in the postgame about not running the ball enough when you were running effectively on the whole. That's part of it. But then you got to run the play action, whether you're going to hand it off or not. They've shown, people have done studies on this, that at least if you threaten the play action, it helps you. You're going to have to do that against the Dolphins. And honestly, it should be more of a staple. 17% is not enough in this offense of play action to get the job done with this wide receiver crew.
Well, yeah, and you look at it, and I actually was looking at this earlier today. Pacheco's in for 8 running snaps last night. Clyde was in for 1. McKinnon was in for 3. I mean, running the ball less than 15 times a game. And yeah, you got to run with Hardman. Yeah, you got to run with Tony, I think.
You don't
Well, I'm saying they did. I'm not saying they have to. I'm saying they did. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was Tony and it was Hardman. But that's not enough times to run the ball. You had, 60 plays? You can't run the ball less than 30% of the time and feel like you're going to do good and be successful in that running game. And they were running at a decent clip. Pacheco didn't run great, but he had 5 yards per average attempt. I mean, that's pretty decent. Clyde had 4. McKinnon's was negative. But, a 5 YPA, I think you got to feel pretty good about it. And, yeah, I know he had 1 long run that kind of offsets a little bit of it. But you can't continue to go away from the running game when it does work at times. You have to sprinkle it in at different times. And you have to figure out the other thing that Reed needs to figure out is he needs to be a little bit more aggressive. You get down in the red zone, I think you need to go for it on 4th down early in the game. I understand that you think that points are going to be needed to beat somebody, and I get it. But give Mahomes a chance on 4th down when you're at the goal line, especially if you're going to run the ball or do that little pitch pass like they did on 3rd down that didn't get successful. If you're that close to the goal line, give them 4 tries.
And we've seen that they've done it at times, not only this season, but the last few, where if they get that minimum volume, that it helps the entire offense. And I think right now you have to give Patrick all the help that he can get, and that means using the run game as well. Let's hope that they listen. We're going to find out what Matt Derrick thinks as he's been in the locker room this week, and he'll give us the insight tomorrow. So don't miss tomorrow's show. Then we're going to take a look with the Dolphins insiders. You guys know Kyle Krabs. If you've listened to the draft show at all, you're going to get some of that. And then we will give you our preview. It is an early game this week. So our preview will be setting you up to be up early to watch a ball game on Sunday morning. We appreciate you guys being with us. Make sure you like, sub, and hit that bell. And the bottom line, Kel wants to know prediction time here. Bat and I will probably be live as the deadline comes down tomorrow. But my gut feeling is they give a wide receiver away. I don't think they get one.
Agreed. I really think that at this point they're going to possibly give away Richie James, but I don't think they're going to pick one up.
Fair enough.
I mean, they could, but I just don't think that they're going to go that direction. They don't have draft capital. Somebody's going to have to want to give somebody away.
In the comments in this video, let us know who you guys think the Chiefs could acquire, and will they require a wide receiver specifically? Would love to know your answer. We appreciate you being with us. Like, sub, hit that bell here on YouTube, sub over on Spotify and Audible and all the places that you can get podcasts. We'll be back with you tomorrow. We appreciate your time, and check out the rest of the Locked On podcast, maybe even that Dolphin show, because you'll want to know what's coming. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.